Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you didn't know, here in Warzone 2, just like we've seen in several other different Call of Duties, you can actually change the properties of certain weapons in game. You can either take a semi-auto gun and actually turn it into a fully automatic gun, or in some instances, you could take a fully automatic gun and turn it into a semi-auto gun. And this year, doing so changes things quite a bit, actually, in so much of a way that some weapons are actually considered meta when you change their properties. Other ones lose a lot of their value if you change their properties. Today I wanted to look at a handful of the weapons, in specific the battle rifles actually, and see if changing the properties of the gun, if changing it from semi-auto to full auto or vice versa, is going to make one specific variation of it more effective and potentially in the meta. So here we are on True Game Data, and we're gonna go through basically all the battle rifles. I think this is a good category to highlight because yes, you can take some of the rifles and turn them into single fire, whatever the case may be, but a lot of the battle rifles semi-auto by default, and I wanted to compare this to obviously how they would function fully automatic. And True Game Data, Tony, the Wizard of Warzone, actually has it available on his site to see all the stats of the semi-auto version of these guns and the full auto versions of these guns, which is really cool. So we're gonna go one by one with each of these and see what the stats are like. So first up here on the FTAC Recon, of course, for all these, we're looking at 250 health, and then also combination shots for the most accurate TTK. And this one's pretty obvious, right? Like not really close whatsoever. If you take the FTAC Recon and turn it fully auto, our orange line here, the TTK is much worse than if you just have it single fire and you're spamming it. Right now, of course, semi-auto weapons do have a bit more of a skill gap than fully auto ones. You have to have that faster trigger finger to maintain a good TTK, and you have to be very accurate with it. But this in particular, this TTK is not even close. Single fire FTAC, absolutely the way to go. Now, when we look at the single fire Lachmann 762 versus the fully automatic Lachmann 762, it's a very different story. Our single fire one, you can see the TTK is only better for about 1 meter here in the grand scheme of things. And again, it is much, much worse than the fully automatic version here. Now, there is something to take note of when you do change these guns to fully automatic, if you're doing that in this instance, and that's that the recoil becomes increasingly worse. You're gonna notice it a lot more when you go from semi-auto spamming to it being fully automatic. So when we go through and we break down the setups here in a bit, you're gonna notice that any ones that we have fully automatic, you really want to focus a lot on control throughout. Now, obviously you want to do that in general, but it's especially important on the fully auto versions here because the recoil is going to be much, much more noticeable. Then next up, we got the SO14, and this one's actually particularly close compared to our first two here. You can see our orange line, the fully automatic SO14 is just ever so slightly better than the standard SO14 single fire. Now, this is one that truly I feel like you could go either way. That said, even with the slightly increased recoil of going fully automatic, I feel like the skill gap of just being able to spray and pray versus having to spam this to really get that insane fire rate and really good TTK is enough of a, gap between the two that makes the automatic one, even with the slightly faster TTK, really a lot more worth using. Now, if you're an insanely good player, you could have an easier gun just by spamming. If you have, maybe a scuff with some digital tap triggers like mine, be sure to use code Immortal if you want to grab one, by the way. Or if you just have a really fast, mouse click trigger or a really fast trigger finger in general, the standard one could work well here. But for most players, I feel like automatic, even with the more recoil, more noticeable recoil, I mean, especially in the mid-range here, that's a large gap in the TTK. And then lastly, we got the TAC V, which is the only battle rifle that by default is actually fully auto. So in this case, you could turn it to single fire if you wanted to. But frankly, I mean, it's not really a good option to go single fire in this case. Keep in mind, the TAC V has seen a lot of nerfs in the past couple of weeks, right? So it's definitely not nearly as good as it was before, where it was like a top 3, top 4 meta weapon in the game. But you can see single fire, its TTK throughout is a lot slower up until 45 meters, which beyond that, that's a negligible difference in fully auto versus single fire. So I just stick with the standard one and go fully auto. So that now being said, we've got all 4 of our best variants here: the single fire FTAC Recon, the fully auto Lachmann 762, the standard TAC V, which is fully auto, and the SO14 fully auto. And when we go ahead and we look at the stats here, again, 250 health combination shots, we get a very interesting chart. Quite frankly, what stands out to me the most is the fact that the TAC V, again, previously one of the best meta weapons in the game, is so much worse than every other option here. Not at one single point in time does it have a better TTK than our other 3 options here. Also, what's very surprising is that the FTAC Recon, which for a long time was regarded as a very underwhelming gun, actually has the best TTK all the way up through 52 meters, in which case it and the Lachmann 7.62 full auto have a negligible difference yet again, one that you would not be able to tell the difference of in game. And honestly, the SO14 right behind the Lachmann 7.62 full auto pretty much throughout. Now, over range, you'll notice that there's a little bit more of a gap here between the full auto Lachmann and the full auto SO14, but again, we're looking at about 40 milliseconds difference there in TTK, which isn't huge. It's something, but you know, not nearly as much of a gap as some of these other weapons here, and by some of the other, I mean the TAC V, right? So really, all three of these options but the TAC V are perfectly viable in this current meta. All very surprisingly good TTKs throughout. So let's go ahead and break down some setups here for those three guns. Now, as we get into this, just a quick reminder, if you guys are new here, every single day I got you covered with all things going on in COD. So if you want to stay up to date with news, updates, loadouts, tips, everything like that, feel free to hit that subscribe button. And if you guys enjoy this video or if you find it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it as well. But first up here, let's focus on the FTAC Recon. Of course, the only single fire weapon we've got here, but that TTK is solid. So if you are accurate with this, which is really the big part, you have to be able to shoot it fast in some of the mid-range fights, and you have to be able to stay on target while shooting it fast. If you can master this gun, the payoff is absolutely there, right? So first up here, I'm going for the Schlager 3.4 times. I really like this optic for semi-auto guns. It works well in the mid-range. It works well over long range. We're tuning for that furthest eye position, and then also the slightly faster aim down sight speed. I go for the 15 round extended mag here. It's pretty much a must have. It's the largest option. You really got to be mindful of your ammo count though when using this, because that is obviously a very limited magazine there. So definitely keep that in mind. High velocity ammo, of course, is going to make this more consistent for the mid to long range with the better bullet velocity. You don't have to lead your shots as much, which is huge in a semi-auto gun. We're tuning for, again, the better velocity and the better damage range as well. I've got the Edge 47 underbarrel, primarily for the better stability. I just don't want this thing swaying. Obviously, it's going to make it more difficult to stay on target and track an enemy, so that'll simplify that. I tune for the better idle stability and recoil stabilization. And then lastly, I go for the Sack and Tread 40. When you are spamming this, of course, you want to focus a lot on that better control, so this will just help out there a good amount. We're going for the better gun kick control and stabilization. I think the Sack and Tread is probably the least necessary for what it's worth on here. If you wanted to try things out with a barrel that's maybe going to give you better velocity, control, and damage range, you could go for that as well. If you wanted to play super aggressive, you could go for like an Olay laser there. There are a couple of options here, but this one is going to be pretty consistent for all skill levels. Now, the SO14 going to be built in pretty much an identical way, and spoiler alert, the Lachmann 7.62 is not going to be much different either, but keep in mind for this one, you are going to be going into full auto mode, so the recoil is going to be more apparent. That's something you want to take note of for sure. In this case, I got the AMOV V4 optic for what it's worth. As always, when we talk about the optics, whatever one you're the most comfortable with, always use that one, right? So in this case, furthest eye position, faster ADS again on that AMOV V4. 25 round mag is what I'm going for in this case. Fully auto, that is still going to run out somewhat quickly, but to me, the gap between 25 and 50 in terms of your reload speed, your movement, your ADS, it's pretty noticeable. Like the 50 round drum is slow. Now that said, if you're okay with that, it's a great option because you don't have to worry about reloading as often, right? So just pick your poison there. A little bit faster extended mag or a much slower but a lot more ammo extended mag, right? Again, we got high velocity on there, better velocity, better damage range on those tunes. Edge 47, here's a solid choice. Again, you could go for the better recoil stabilization and aiming stability. That said, if you wanted to go all in on recoil control in this case, you could also go for the lock grip precision. That's going to give you like a 10%, a 9% increase to your recoil control, which is huge. So that's also like a nice secondary option. Just depends if you want the better all-out control or better stability there. Once more, pick your poison, right? And then again, Sack and Tread 40, better gun kick control, better recoil stabilization in this case as well. Surprisingly fun, surprisingly good setup. And then lastly, with the Lachmann 7.62, again, it's going to be a very similar build to those other options here. I got the Cronin Mini Pro here. This is going to be a blue dot optic. Once more, if you like something more, always go for that. Furthest eye position, faster ADS, rinse and repeat. 30 round extended mag here. Again, the 50 round drum just seems ridiculously slow, so I'm not a huge fan, but if you're okay with being that much slower, once more, it's not a bad choice if you like that extra ammo capacity. 7.62 high velocity, per usual here, better velocity, better damage range. I'm definitely going for the lock grip precision in this case over any stability option. Like, yes, stability, we all know, super important, but the recoil on the 7.62 especially, I feel like is just so much more standout-ish, if you will, when in full auto. So having that max recoil control is going to be clutch here. That said, I do tune for the better ADS speed and hip walking speed because the tuning options on the lock grip precision kind of suck. And then lastly, once more, we got the SAC and Shred 40, better stabilization, better gun kit control on there as well. You can't really go wrong with any of these options, but all of them for sure. When you switch that fire rate, with the exception of the FTAC Recon, of course, go into what is basically a completely different gun, completely different stats, more damage, if you will, faster TTK, however you want to phrase it. It's an interesting change to the weapons dynamics in general. But that being said, that is going to wrap things up for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications. That way you can always guarantee you're up to date with all things going on. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy. Have an awesome rest of your day. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.